Hi there, my name is Juji. Welcome to my channel. I'm so excited for you to be here. This is a space for everyone and anyone who's interested in exploring self-development and relationships through the human design system. A couple of months ago, I had the honor of being invited to speak at the High Desert Human Design Conference. This is a gathering of people who are in their experiment and who teach and read human design charts. The whole conference is comprised of panel discussions and individual talks discussing different aspects of the human design system. And when I was asked what I would like to talk about, I said I wanted to talk about relationships and bonding. What else? I was a motivational speaker in a past life, and when I sat down to write this talk, I knew that I wanted to make it very personal. I had learned so much about relationships on my own journey, and I wanted to pass along this wisdom that I had collected. I also did a Q&A once my talk was over, so stay tuned for that. I'm so happy that you're here that I could share this with you.
All right. So, as Jessie said, my name is Juji, and this is about relationships and bonding. I am a 6'2". I'm a split definition, obviously. I am sacral authority, and I am going to be talking to you guys about my experience from the roof. I've been here for a couple of years, even though I keep getting told I still look like I'm in my first Saturn. It's said in the program, actually, that my deep dives into relationship make people squirm, so let's see if I can live up to that hype. Roz said something during a lecture I was listening to a few years ago that was so profound, and it had nothing to do with the lecture itself. He just kind of tossed in one of his gold nuggets, and it kind of dropped into my body. He said, all of the relationships in your life only exist in your mind. And this was really serendipitous because there was a relationship that I myself was really trying to understand. In fact, this person's chart was pulled up on the screen in front of me as I heard Ross speak these words. And it dawned on me that I didn't know this person at all. He was just somebody that I cobbled together through like memories and assumptions over the years. And then I realized I never treated him correctly. He was a projector who I never invited or recognized. He was a 3-5, and I was constantly projecting all this stuff onto him. Mostly that it was his job to solve our relationship. That was the projection. This tiny little raw quote set me off on this whole quest because I realized that if I didn't know him, I didn't know anyone. We had been making and breaking bonds for 12 years. So it all goes back to our childhood, when we're first learning how to relate to one another. And there's a saying that your parents or your teachers try to instill in you: treat others as you would want to be treated. But nothing could be more homogenized than this. Nothing. We're all here to be treated differently, but it's not enough to understand how to treat other people. It's about communicating how you want to be treated. I've done many readings for women over the years, and they are all very frustrated. Some of them are bitter. Some of them are angry, but all of them are disappointed in their relationships. And it always comes back to the same complaint. If only we could fix the communication between us, everything would be perfect. But we assume that our partner knows exactly what they need to do in order to please us. So they are either doing something or not doing something, and we take it very personally. How could we not? So we withhold to spite them. And then around and around we go. But this is a person that you're just here to fly through time and space with. And we're actually here to enjoy the ride. So how do we do that without driving each other crazy? All of these women that I speak to who complain about the communication have one thing in common. Their partner is either a different type or a different authority, and sometimes both. To illustrate the not self games we play in relationships, I want to paint you a picture of a scenario. Meet Max, meet Jane. They're fictional characters. They're both generators. Max is emotional authority, Jane is sacral. They meet at a party, they flirt, they have a good time. They start dating, they fall in love, and everything is going smoothly. Until about 8 months into the relationship, when Jane's lease is ending, and she tells Max she thinks they should move in together. They have about a month to decide. Max tenses up. Only a month to decide? His emotional wave is not clear about this at all. He needs more time. Jane takes this very personally, but she doesn't want to be that girl. So she files it away. And over the next month, she manipulates and cajoles and pokes until Max relents and they move in together. She's satisfied for now, but it's been noted. A few weeks after they move in together, Max's wave dips for the first time. But Jane has never experienced this before, right? So she thinks something is really wrong. She asks him over and over again, and he says it's nothing. But she doesn't believe him. She assumes he's not happy moving in together. But she doesn't want to be too pushy, so she files it away. About a year goes by. The wave's been going up and down. They fight. She projects. Nonetheless, people start asking, when are you guys getting married? Jane's ready. She's been looking at rings. Max isn't even ready to have this conversation. They haven't known each other that long. They've only spent like 2 Christmases together. She's devastated. How could they not be on the same page? But she doesn't want to be too needy. So she files it away, and they fight about everything else. A year goes by again. She's getting real tired of waiting, so he finally gets down on one knee, pops the question. They're engaged. They plan the wedding, everything's great, even though there's sort of this shadow cast over the relationship already. Max has no idea. About, let's say, 6 months after they get married, Jane's out with friends and she runs into her ex-boyfriend, Josh. Josh is a splenic projector. They flirt, they catch up, She's loving this focus. And he's so much lighter. She wonders to herself, why didn't we ever work out in the first place? She goes home. Max is low in his wave again. They fight, and Jane wishes she could be with somebody less unpredictable, less moody, less heavy. Someone like Josh. So she finds herself texting Josh the next day. Soon they're texting daily. Then they're setting up innocent drinks. And I think you all know where this is going. Jane and Josh start an affair because she needs an escape. She needs an escape from the unpredictable moodiness of this wave. She needs to talk about music and TV and bullshit instead of this heaviness, all these files she's been collecting, all these waves that keep dipping, that she keeps taking in. It's too much. She has to get out of there. It's easier than admitting to herself and everybody else that her marriage isn't working. Does this scenario or any part of this sound familiar to anyone? Yep. Does anyone know someone like Jane? All of your hands should be up because I am Jane. Are you squirming yet? I met human design at the very end of my first marriage, and it made me more patient with the wave. It made me understand what was going on more. But I was definitely not yet ready to face all of the things that I had avoided and assumed. This warehouse full of files that I was keeping on my husband. It was challenging. So it was easier to leave than to stay. And it didn't feel aligned anymore. My path just wasn't a part of us anymore. So we got a divorce. It's a rite of passage for 6 lines, I guess. I've been thinking about what the lessons are that came out of this. It's what I'm here to do on the roof, right? Make sense out of all of these things. And I realized that the cross of planning is all about the bargain. And we take that into our relationships as well. It's greedy, it's transactional. I'll give you this much love if you give me this much in return. I'll show you my feelings first if you show me yours. It's not working. It's so 7-centered. The person you're with is not a reflection of your worth. I couldn't even see past my own needs and consider that somebody would need more time to make a decision. It didn't line up with my timeline, so it was a problem. And I didn't grow up with emotionality in my household, so it didn't even occur to me. I also think about the lessons I learned from my affair with the splenic projector, whose chart I happened to be looking at when I heard Ross say, all of the relationships you have only exist in your mind. When his focus was on me, it was incredible. When it was taken away, I felt like I was missing a limb. He loved my energy, but when I removed it, We would fight terribly, and I wasn't giving him the recognition that he wanted, that I didn't know how to give. We became each other's own very specific brand of heroin, and detoxing from that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I'm actually thinking about starting a support group for generators who have had the focus of a projector removed. Who could use that? I see you. Yeah, it's not easy. I have the channel of focus and concentration, the 952, so these lessons were very focused and concentrated. The lesson about holding on to things that are bad for me with my spleen, my open spleen, 4 years too long. It's a long time. Somebody asked me if I thought that I would still be married to my first husband if I had had human design from the very beginning. And I said, to be honest with you, I don't think we would have gotten married in the first place. See, we met in my Saturn return, and I was starting to feel settled, and I was starting to feel more calm, more grounded, and my mind told me, this means you're supposed to settle down. If I had known what was going on, if I had had the awareness that I was climbing onto the roof and I was going to be more introspective, I wouldn't have made it somebody else's responsibility to give that to me. I could have given it to myself. We could have saved ourselves a lot of pain. A house in the suburbs wasn't going to help me make sense out of the first 30 years, I can tell you that. I'll leave you with this sentiment. I had the honor of speaking with Marianne Winiger a few years ago. She's a fellow 6'2", and as a role model, she has a lot to say about relationships because she'd been married for many years before she met Human Design. And when she heard about passenger consciousness, she realized that what she had been wanting from her husband is for him to sit in the back seat with her and look out her window and see all of the same stuff that she was seeing. And then she realized, actually, no, he's sitting in his back seat, looking out his window, seeing very, very different things. They just happen to be traveling on the same road together for now. But actually, what was going on in his vehicle was none of her business. He was none of her business. Because love is wanting the best for someone else without making yourself responsible for that, and vice versa. When she told me this story, it really landed for me. We're not here to make others responsible for our own self-love. Human Design is a way for us to learn to trust ourselves. And then maybe we get to love ourselves along this journey. But I take Marianne's words with me everywhere I go. And it's really helped me to connect with people more deeply, to try and understand them, because they are no longer responsible for how I love myself. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to take questions now, and if anybody wants to come and speak to me privately, I invite you to do so. We still have a couple of days left here, so thank you. So the question was that she's a, you got, yeah, okay. She's a 6'2" projector, and her roommate is a 3'6" emotional generator, and how to set boundaries, especially in close quarters, I imagine. And, you know, with this, I mean, 90% of the population is the generator projector relationship, which is why we're here to really understand that very deeply, right? And something that I learned very early on in my process is being a hermit means needing a lot of time to recharge, even though you remember the part of you that loved going out all the time as a third line. You remember that you. Sometimes you look at pictures of that you and you're like, who was that? But the 6'2" on the roof, that's a very specific kind of alone time that you need. Oh, so you're not on the roof yet. Oh,
Yes, I'm 25.
so much to look forward to.
Yeah.
It gets better. Regardless, I feel like what I want to say then is that, you know, being in your third line phase, you might think, I need to go bump into a lot of things, and then your body will be like, sit down. But yeah, that's something that I had a really hard time communicating, and so I did have to manipulate a lot in order to get my alone time, instead of just being very straightforward and asking for my space, you know, because the open solar plexus does not want to make other people feel bad. And so you think that you need to make stuff up, literally make stuff up for why you need your alone time. I mean, the open solar plexus is like the master manipulator, in a sense, because what you're doing is you're really managing people's image of you. And you don't want to be a bad roommate, you don't want to be a bad friend, you don't want to be insensitive to other people's stuff. But unless you fill your own cup, you can't fill anyone else's. That's why the future is about enlightened selfishness. I can't help you unless I'm okay. So to sort of circle back around to, it's not your responsibility to make sure she's okay. It's your responsibility to make sure you're okay. And then comes is she inviting you? Do you feel seen by her? Do you feel recognized? Can you share with her how her wave is affecting you without pointing fingers, without wanting to have her explain to you why she feels the way that she does? I assumed a lot about the dips in the wave. You know that saying that IKEA is where couples go to fight? It's a thing. I just remember like being at IKEA and my husband's wave dipped and like we left without a couch or anything. It was just terrible. And I just made all these assumptions about how he like hated my taste in couches. But like none of that was true, right? Like it was all in my head. So separating like your inner authority, which is here to guide you, and like your mind that keeps on repeat telling you what this person's wave means. Because the mind wants to explain emotions, whether you're taking them in or you're putting them out, or if you're a 59-6 and you're doing both. But the mind can't explain emotions, and it drives us crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. It's crazy making. Did I answer your question? To a degree? You know, it's easier having like the actual charts up, but that's a very nice overview. Yes.
Could you picture the possibility or any scenario in which, not necessarily with your former husband, but you as a third line enter into a long-term relationship and carry it up onto the roof and having it be correct for you?
Well, I've seen it, so I know that it is possible to carry. There's a couple of like pillars that are universally accepted as like the mark of a good relationship. And one of those pillars is being able to grow together, right? Because like we said, we're all in these vehicles. We're traveling through time and space. Can we continue to go on the same path? Or does one person veer off? And I think that what I said at the very end of explaining what happened with my ex-husband is I met human design, and all of a sudden that's all I wanted to do, right? It was like a full-time obsession. But he had met me and I was working in fashion. You know, I wasn't that same person anymore. And I mean, this is an aside, but he has channel 515, rhythm and flow. Like, I was really messing up his flow. Like, he thought he knew what he was getting himself into, and he had no idea. So when we were breaking up, we had this conversation, and he said to me over and over and over again, but I did everything right. But I did everything right. But I did everything right. And it made me furious. Because I was like, we're breaking up. Obviously, that's not true. But he wasn't actually wrong at all. He did what he felt was the correct way to be a husband, and I was the one that changed. I was the one that climbed onto the roof. I was the one who could no longer accept working in corporate America and doing all of these things, and he just wanted his like quiet rhythm and flow. And so my path was no longer aligned with his, and that's okay. It's only our minds that want to make that terrible, right? Because divorce is nasty and ugly, and it's supposed to be. But I do feel that, especially with people who have an open line of communication, that it is possible to go through this six lines are the role models who display for us this 3-part life cycle, right? So our Saturn return is more pronounced, but that doesn't mean that we don't all go through a Saturn return. So if you marry someone before this enormous shift that almost everybody experiences in an intense way, then it's just about being able to communicate with your partner so that they don't feel responsible for what you're going through. Does that make sense? Yes. Excellent question. It was the 4037. So we're both ego defined, and so it was not. Sometimes that becomes the battle of wills. For us, it was not really about will at all. But I think that when he was expressing that he had done everything right, he meant that he was carrying out the bargain between us because he thought he knew what that bargain was. He thought he knew what I had expected of him. And I mean, that story was verbatim our story, so I did push him into getting married. And so I'm sure that his channel of the bargain was like, community, the bargain, was like, but I married you. Like, you wanted this. So why is this, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, mentally, it doesn't make any sense. But the dilemma with this channel is that people who have it assume that everybody knows what the bargain is. Not only that, but the bargain needs to be revisited. There was no checking in with one another. How's it going for you? I encourage that a lot for people. Check in with your partner. This is a temperature check. What's going on? Are you still cool with this? I do this now. I know we said that this is how it was going to be, and this is how we were going to live, and this is what we were going to, these were our agreements. I don't even have this channel, right? But these were our agreements. Are you still cool with that? It's pretty simple, but it didn't even occur to me at the time, right? He was also 5'1". A lot of projection there too. And he bridged my split. No choice. There was no choice. I mean, honestly. Yes. The question was, am I married again? Mm-hmm. And how did I do it differently this time? With the knowledge of human design. I think people think that if you have human design, it's going to be like these big things, right? These huge, huge things that are going to be different. But actually, I feel like it's always the little things. My husband now is sacral authority, which makes things a lot easier. We're both very spontaneous together. It's really nice. He's a 3-6, so we have that 6 line, and he's in his Chiron, so he seems pretty, he knows himself, which is really refreshing. And just honoring the 3rd line, actually, is really important. Creating a place that's safe for us to be ourselves, even if he didn't know where it was coming from. Like, I had his chart before we met in Aura. I'm that girl. I'm like, do you know what time you were born? On Hinge, where we met. So this is a great example that I love to use because it is so small and yet so huge. We were on the highway by my house, and it's a 3-lane highway that turns into a 2-lane highway, and he was in the middle lane. And I said to him, stay in the middle lane because we have to get off on the next exit. So he immediately changes lanes to the right lane, which he realizes ending, and then he gets stuck behind a truck. And then he goes over to the left lane, and then he has to speed up and go around the truck and then go off the exit, and it's a mess. It's a mess. And I'm just cracking up. I'm like, oh, that 3rd line just had to experience how that doesn't work. It was perfect. It was better than perfect. And we both just laughed about it. And in that moment, I caught myself. Because like you get to be more in real time with yourself the longer you're in human design. And I said to him, I go, that could have been a huge fight. He goes, what do you mean? We don't fight. And I was like, no, I know, but it could have been a huge fight, meaning I could have gotten mad at you for not listening to me. I told you to stay in this lane. You never fucking listened to me. Meh. And the nitpicking, because I would have taken that personally, that he didn't listen to my instruction. Because I had already made that mistake. But he had to make it for himself. And that's how we can laugh about the third line experience without blaming or pointing fingers or shaming. And it's so small, it's so nuanced, but like your relationships are like a sum of moments together. And that was a way to coexist in like joy and positive reinforcement of like, yes, this is just your process. And now he'll say to me, listen to this funny thing I did. Third line. It's great. It's so freeing. And when I explained to him about being a hermit and how I did need alone time, he was like, that's okay, I do too. Because he has the gate of retreat in his chart. We don't live together. So, everything is different. But at the same time, what makes it different is the tiny things. Anyone else? Anyone on the chat? Hi, Mom. I took a big pause on the dating. I felt like I was grieving two relationships. It was very painful to have that projector focus removed. It was really painful, the destabilization that happened after the marriage fell apart. So I did try to date after a little bit, just to prove I could, I guess. And it was a disaster. But no, I don't think that I dismissed anybody simply for what was in their chart. I just tried to approach everybody according to what I saw. Because it's not about, oh, this is never going to work. It's about the awareness of how to make it work. Which again was like circles back to if I had been aware of climbing onto the roof, if I had been aware of the open solar plexus, if I had been aware of projector generator, it would have all been, it had to happen. We had no choice, but it all would have been so different. So I dated emotional people. I dated projectors briefly, and then I took a long pause. And then I just kind of, the 2946 is serendipity, and I just knew that I was going to be in the right place at the right time to meet the right person. And when I truly leaned into that and trusted that, there was no second guessing. There was no oh my God, this is work. But yeah, no, I don't think I would dismiss anyone for what was in their chart. Anyone else? Let Jessie ask her question.
Okay, let me structure this question. Mm-hmm. So I often find that when people discover human design or when they deepen into their process, there's often a shattering when they realize, shit, I've built a life perhaps with somebody else that was based entirely on my not self and possibly even entered into it incorrectly, initiated it, and I guess what outer authority, role model, wisdom might you give to someone in this situation on how to weather that awareness gracefully, and especially for the projectors and the generators, how to foster that awareness but not initiate an ending, if that makes sense?
Well, does it feel true that when a partnership dissolves, it's considered a failure? Like we say, marriages fail, relationships fail. So to like not necessarily allow ourselves to latch on to that homogenized perspective. And in a lot of cases, it's about, I mean, it's not like I met human design and the next day I was like, peace, you know? I had that shattering, you know? I really saw how A, none of it was working, and B, that I had chosen this person based on very superficial things. We both worked in fashion. He was a good-looking guy, well-dressed. He was like good arm candy. But my sun personality is the gate of depth, 48. There was no depth. There was no depth there at all. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. He wasn't even curious about me. Definitely wasn't curious about human design. But what I will say is, because I now was in this experiment of waiting to respond, I was like, okay, like, I take that seriously, and I'm going to wait to respond to see what happens. And I think it was probably 8 or 9 months into my experiment where one day, like out of nowhere, my body was like, I can't be here anymore. I can't. I won't. And then, once that decision was made, like everything moved so quickly. I called my friend. I need a job. I need a place to live. I need this. I need that. He's like, I got you. How soon can you be here? So within 2 weeks, I was packed and out. But it wasn't until I was clear, even as a sacral authority, it wasn't until I was clear that my body could not tolerate for another second being in that relationship anymore. It wasn't until then that I responded and made all the correct moves in order to secure that outcome. So like you said, it is about following your strategy and honoring your inner authority even after the shattering happens. Because even though you didn't enter in correctly, possibly, doesn't mean it isn't ultimately correct. I actually have this question for others who had long-standing relationships with their partners, not necessarily 6 lines, not necessarily people who went through this enormous shift of climbing onto the roof, but who may have come to those realizations, but it didn't ultimately end the partnership. Well, what's that like, reintroducing yourself to your partner of however many years? You know, because it is. You're meeting yourself for the first time, and you're introducing yourself to this person for the first time. I know it's always been like this, but I just realized that doesn't work for me. How about we do it this way? And they either accept that or they don't. But if they don't, how can we not take that personally? Life is chemical, never personal. If you're suddenly setting these boundaries and the person can't accept it because they were the ones benefiting from you not having any boundaries, it might be as simple as they're not your fractal, which is like painful, but mostly for the mind. Does that answer your question, Jesse? Yay. Such good questions, you guys. I love it up here. More questions, please. I could go for the rest of the night, but I won't. What time is it? Okay. Going once, going twice. Can I say something about bonds made and broken with the 3 and the 6? It's bonds made and broken and then made again, actually. So what I found, my splenic projector was a 3-5, right? And I left. I left him. And then slowly, we started to cultivate a friendship, not based on intimacy, not based on romance. And I asked him, did you consider what happened between us a breakup? And he said no. I'm like, I don't even know what made me ask that question, because in my mind it was 1,000% a breakup. But he was like, we're still talking. Just the nature of the relationship changed. We still text each other occasionally about nothing, memes usually, and cat videos. But the bond may never be fully broken with a 3rd line. The door is always just a little bit open, just in case you want to come back. I actually just had a really wild experience. When I first heard the term bonds made and broken about my 3rd line phase, it wasn't relationships that I was really like reflecting on, but friendships that had broken up. And one in particular that was very, very painful in my 20s. Just like heart-shattering breakup with my roommate. She came back into my life like 3 weeks ago. We hadn't spoken in 14 years. And she initiated the whole thing. She was like, I just want you to know, I've been watching your life on social media and I've been rooting for you this whole time. I almost sent you a wedding present the first time you got married. And I had no idea. But we reconnected and she was like, hey, do you want to do a Zoom call sometime? And I was like, yeah, sure. She was like, how about in 10 minutes? I go, uh-huh. And so our bond wasn't severed like I thought it was 14 years prior. And there were so many lessons in that one particular breakup. And I always look to that one particular incident when I think about my open solar plexus and how dysfunctional it was. But the fact that it came back around, the bonds are made and they're broken and they're made again. And maybe they'll break again, who knows? But it's like kind of what you have to accept as a 3rd or a 6th line is that it's constantly, it's cyclical. It's not a guillotine necessarily. Don't burn the bridge all the way down. Oh, do you want to burn the bridge all the way down? I felt that way 14 years ago. That bitch, I'm never talking to her again. I gave her everything. She gave me nothing. I had none of that left. None of it. It was just like all love for this experience that I had at that time. But that resentment lasted for years. And I don't even know her chart yet. I'm guessing she's also an open solar plexus. We decided to stop living together on a Post-it. That's a real thing. I'm sorry, I can't, don't hate me. Does that answer your question? Hmm. Well, he's a 3/6, so we break the bond every day, right? We don't live in the same place, so it's like always a special occasion when we're together. It's really nice, actually. It is. It's like being married but still dating. Keeping him on his toes. I still get flowers. Anyone else? All right, guys, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Jen, for this.
All right, guys, I know that was a lot of information, personal and otherwise. If you have any comments or questions, please drop them below. Please give this a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to get notified every time I drop a new video. You can also follow me on Instagram at HDbyZ, and you can find me on my website. The link will be in the show notes. There you can see I offer individual human design readings, a relationship mentorship program, and a community for conscious women practicing their strategy and authority through the human design system called the Beehive. Until next time, ciao for now.